Alright. So in nervous system, probably you know the central nervous system is divided into brain and spinal cord. Right? In the brain, we divide it into prosencephalon or forebrain, mesencephalon or midbrain, and the brainstem or the hindbrain. In the prosencephalon, as you know, that the mantle layer that gives the grey matter that occupies the marginal layer. That's why the cortex is outside and the white matter is inside in cerebellum and in cerebral cortex, right? But in other areas like spinal cord, this migration doesn't happen. So the ependymal layer lies the cerebral cavities, that is the aqueduct of Sylvius, the lateral ventricle, the fourth ventricle. Next, the mantle layer gives the grey matter and the marginal layer gives the white matter. This is the basic architecture of the brain, right? Now so the cortical masses around the lateral ventricle forms the diencephalon. That forms the diencephalon. That is the thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, metathalamus, all are included in the diencephalon, right? So prosencephalon is divided into telencephalon and diencephalon. Below that we see the midbrain. From embryological period up to the adult period, midbrain doesn't show much changes, right? Only that the aqueduct of Sylvius that connects the lateral ventricle through the foramen of Monro and the fourth ventricle in the floor of pons and medulla, right? That increases in diameter just a little, not more than that. And the fourth ventricle that lies in the lower part of the pons and upper part of the medulla. Pons and cerebellum are included in the metencephalon, and medulla oblongata is the myelencephalon. So midbrain is the mesencephalon, pons, medulla and cerebellum is the rhombencephalon. It has two parts. Pons and cerebellum are included in the metencephalon. Medulla oblongata in the myelencephalon. And at the end of the medulla oblongata, just above the origin of first cervical nerve, right? At the upper border of the atlas, it is continued below as the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, the canal of the cavity of the brain is continued at the spinal canal. And spinal cord from the origin goes up to lower border of L1 in adult. But in children, it is up to lower border of L2. And in fetal life, it occupies the whole of the vertebral canal. Right? You should remember this. And now, at the end of the spinal cord, there is a conical dilatation, which is known as the conus medullaris. After the tapering conus medullaris, there is a non-nervous pial reticulum, which is known as phylum terminally, 20 cm in length, 15 cm phylum terminally internally, and 5 cm phylum terminally externals. Right? From the L4 to the S1, there are anterior and posterior. If you count the anterior and posterior roots that doesn't unite, there will be 40 nerve roots coming out, which constitutes the cauda equina. There will from L4 to L4, L5, L6, L4, L5, then the 5 sacra, 5 sacral and 1 coccygeal. This gives 40 nerve roots. Together with phylum terminally, it comes out. That constitutes the L3, L4, L5, 5 sacral, this is 8, and the coccygeal nerve. This constitutes the cauda equina. Equina means horse, cauda means tail, right? So you must learn. Do you know what is cauda equina syndrome? No. All right. There will be saddle anesthesia, impairment of passing urine and stool, blah blah blah. All right. We will read it. Now let us wander upon the lowest part of the. So brainstem is constituted by what? Midbrain, pons, and medulla. Midbrain, pons, and medulla. And at the pontomedullary junction, there is a transverse sulcus. There is a transverse sulcus. And medulla is subdivided into upper open part and lower closed part. And the canal within the medulla, upper part of the canal of the medulla is broadened and forms foramen cecum at the lower border of pons, which is a blind diverticulum. So the canal in the medulla is wide in the upper part, forming foramen cecum at the lower border of the pons, which is a blind diverticulum. And in the from the lower border, it is continued as the spinal canal. Right? Now, we study the medulla. First study with the gross structure of medulla, then we subdivide it for transverse section. Alright. What medulla has? It has a junction with the pons, that is the pontomedullary junction. Alright. Then it has a communication with the inferior cerebellar peduncle. The medulla has a communication with the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Right? Superior cerebellar peduncle and middle cerebral peduncle are higher up on the upper part. The inferior cerebellar peduncle from the brainstem, this is the on the dorsal part, there are nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. From there, this is the spinal canal. This is the nucleus gracilis, nucleus cuneatus of this side. This is the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus of this side, which receive the spinocerebellar tract mainly. Alright. And this lower part, that is the upper part of the spinal cord, diverges like this, laterally, and forms the inferolateral boundary of fourth ventricle. Inferolateral boundary of fourth ventricle. In medulla, we see there is an anteromedial fissure and posteromedial sulcus. Anterolateral fissure and posterolateral fissure. Pyramid is in the midline, just medial to the anterolateral sulcus. Pyramid is the cross fibers of the corticospinal tract, that is the pyramidal tract, right? At lateral to the pyramid, there is the olivary nucleus. There is the olivary nucleus. All right. Lateral to what? And in between the junction of pyramid and olivary nucleus, the hypoglossal nerve comes out. Hypoglossal nerve comes out. It is the situation of the upper part of the medulla. Then we see that around the aqueduct there are 4 nuclei. Now 1, 2, that is the nucleus of cranial accessory. 3 and 4, nucleus of hypoglossal nerve. Then we see find the behind the posterolateral sulcus, we find the inferior cerebellar peduncle and the vestibular area. Let me draw the picture and you will understand the thing properly. All right. This is the basic structure of trilaminar germ disc. That is, this is the surface ectoderm or this is the mesoderm, there is the paraxial mesoderm, intermediate cell, and it is the lateral plate mesoderm. And this is the endoderm. And this is the mesoderm, this is the ectoderm. Right? In the midline, there is proliferation of this ectodermal layer, surface ectoderm, giving rise to neuroectoderm, gradually forming a rounded tube which gets detached from the surface, and the detachment point gives rise to the ganglionic cells. This detachment point, cells of the detachment point gives rise to the ganglionic cell. So this is the neural tube, this is the ganglionic cells, this is the proliferation of the surface ectoderm, this is the notochord, right? And notochord will be enclosed by the development of the vertebra. The neural tube will be enclosed by the development of the vertebra, and vertebral canal will enclose the neural tube, right? This neural tube will be enclosed after the development of the vertebra, and within the pedicle and the lamina, this neural tube will be engulfed, right? Now we see another development, that is at first the neural tube has just a single layer of tall columnar cells. And this is the central canal. Later on, the single layer tall columnar cell differentiates into pseudostratified columnar cell with starcocelia. Always mention ependymal layer with mentioning the starcocelia in ependymal cell, right? Then it proliferates to form the three layers. This is the mantle layer and this is the marginal layer. These ependymal cells give rise to neuroblast and spongioblast. These ependymal cells give rise to neuroblast and spongioblast. Neuroblast forms the nerve and the spongioblast form the astrocytes and oligodendrocytes. This ependymal layer gives rise to neuroblast and spongioblast. The neuroblast gives rise to the neurons and the spongioblast gives rise to the astrocytes and oligodendrocytes, like the Schwann cells in the peripheral nerve, right? This is the mantle layer. This is the marginal layer. And this is the ependymal layer. Now, as I have told, in cerebral cortex and in cerebellum, this marginal layer that gives rise to the grey matter, this migrates to the marginal layer. So, the cortex of cerebral cortex and the cerebellar cortex, there is grey matter outside and white matter inside, because the mantle layer gives the grey matter, the marginal layer gives the white matter. You understood? As it migrates to the marginal layer and pushes the white matter inside, so the grey cortex is outside and the white matter is inside. Now you see, now you study the middle. This is the medulla in the upper part, all right. This is pyramidal decussation. These fibers, you can see, when you see the medulla, you will be able to see that fibers are decussating here. These are decussating here. And from the anteromedian fascia, there are another group of nerves. from the anterior median fissure where the pyramidal fiber decussate. From that anterior median fissure, anterior external arcuate fibers comes out. Write down. From the anterior median fissure where the pyramidal fibers decussate, from there this red colored anterior external arcuate fibers comes out. Alright. Now you see, this is the hypoglossal nerve, this is hypoglossal nucleus, this is hypoglossal nerve, this is its nucleus. Number 9 is medial lemniscus. Number 7 is nucleus of cranial nucleus of spinal accessory. This is 7 and 8 is hypoglossal nucleus. Now comes 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. One is the nucleus gracilis. One is the nucleus gracilis. Two is the nucleus cuneatus. One is nucleus gracilis. Two is the nucleus cuneatus. The dorsal spinocerebellar tract, that ends in the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. This one is nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. After it terminates or do synaptic connection, from there some fibers comes out. After the spinocerebellar tract ends in the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus, the fibers comes out is the internal arcuate fibers. These are internal arcuate fibers. Fibers. They decussate in the midline. The internal arcuate fiber decussates in the midline. Alright. This is the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Inferior cerebellar peduncle, and this one is the vestibular nucleus. Right. The remaining is only 3 and 4. 1 nucleus gracilis, 2 nucleus cuneatus, 3 fasciolus solitarius. 4 is the nucleus ambiguous. And 5 is the vestibular nucleus. Got it? see the diagram and describe it. Alright, only I have made this part. There is the anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tract together with the trigeminal nucleus. Anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tract together with the trigeminal nucleus. Got it? Draw the diagram and imagine the picture, otherwise you will not be able to understand this. This is the upper part. In the lower part, there is only some differences in the lower part. There is the lower closed part. এখানে থাকবে the diagram I drew before, that is the lower part, and when I demonstrate this tectospinal tract, medial longitudinal bundle and the medial lemniscus, then it comes to for the upper part, right? There is other differences in this lateral column. There are anterior and posterior spinothalamic tract, anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tract, rubrospinal tract, spino-olivary tract, olivospinal tract on the lateral column. Alright. Now, above the cuneate tubercle, you may find accessory cuneate tubercle. Remember, this is the cuneate nucleus, and above it is the fasciculus cuneatus. This is the gracile tubercle, above that is the fasciculus gracilis. Alright. Now you will see above the nucleus cuneatus, like the accessory olivary nucleus, there could be accessory cuneate nucleus, and this part is somewhat projected outwards. This is known as tuber cynarium. Tuber cynarium. This is an ependymal thickening causing this elevation. When you are going to do a neurosurgery to transect the spinal tract and spinal tract of trigeminal nerve, you need to find this ependymal swelling, that is the tuber cynarium. When you can get this spinal tract of trigeminal, then you transect in case of trigeminal neuralgia. Alright, below the tuber cynarium, which is an ependymal thickening above the nucleus cuneatus. Got it? Now let me tell to applied importance, not of physiology, that is of anatomy. There are two syndromes in relation to medulla. One is lateral medullary syndrome, and another is medial medullary syndrome. You should read both of these two. It often comes as a short note, right? In case of medial medullary syndrome, it's a rare infarction that affects the anteromedial part of the medulla, causing ipsilateral hypoglossal palsy, contralateral sensory loss and partial hemiplegia, together with incoordination of pharyngeal and muscles of deglutition. All right. So there are dysarthria, nystagmus, contralateral hemiparesis, ipsilateral tongue paralysis. So the tongue will deviate towards the side where there is trunk paralysis. যেদিকটা প্যারালিসিস হয়েছে অপোজিট সাইডটা এইদিকে লিশন হয়েছে, ট্রাঙ্ক প্যারালিসিসটা কন্ট্রাল্যাটারাল, তাহলে টাঙের এই দিকটা উইক, ঠিক আছে? তাহলে এটার টাংটা অপোজিট সাইডে চলে যাবে, ঠিক আছে? তার সঙ্গে নসিয়া, ভমিটিং, হেন তেন এগুলো থাকে, রাইট? নাও কামস টু ইট ইজ ডিউ টু হোয়াট? posterior infarction in the thromboembolic obstruction of the posterior inferior cerebellar artery together with vertebral artery and the spinal artery, right? Now in case of the medial medullary syndrome, there we also see tongue paralysis, ipsilateral tongue paralysis, contralateral sensory loss, deep sensory loss. There is vibration and temperature sensation is lost, but the pain and temperature sensation remains intact. All right, and there could be, not always, that is the nystagmus, dysarthria, like this thing. All right, and failure of coordination of gait. Where there is trunk muscle paralysis, limb muscles paralysis, there will be problem of coordination of gait. This is due to thromboembolic obstruction and infarction, causing infarction of the anterior spinal artery and posterior inferior cerebellar artery plus fourth part of vertebral artery, right? One thing more is during medico-legal hanging, what we do, we put the noose, put a pull into this, and the body hangs, right? And it hangs with protrusion of eyeball, defecation, micturition, all this occurs voluntarily. Tongue comes out, and what is more important, then the body is dipped into an well, so that the bodily turbulence for living, the common people cannot see. And there, the gallows job that performs the hanging, he does the movement of the rope, noose. Thereby, the odontoid process strikes the medulla, because medulla is situated over the basic occiput, separated by basilar venous plexus. Medulla is situated on the basic occiput. You know the basic occiput? You can identify the basic occiput? Yes or no? Can you identify the basic occiput? This is the squamous part of occipital bone. Below there is the condyles and the foramen magnum. Laterally there is the jugular process, and anteriorly there is thick bone. There is the basic occiput. So the medulla lies over the basic occiput, separated by meninges and basilar venous plexus, right? And as you know, the medulla contains the important vital center, respiratory as well as cardiovascular. So when he sways the noose the odontoid process strikes the vital centers of medulla. All right, so that the pain and suffering of when the vital centers are stroked, then the person going the hanging will die within few minutes. He will not suffer the pain and pain and air hunger of hanging. What is? This is medico-legal hanging that differs from the suicidal hanging. There is a difference with medico-legal hanging and suicidal hanging. Got my point? Thank you all for listening patiently.